One of the biggest financial mistakes parents make is assuming they know what their child's future will look like. Parents are told to open a 529 plan the second their kid is born. But what if your child doesn't go to college? What if AI completely changes higher education? What if they get a full scholarship? What if they start a business? What if they decide to study overseas where they can't use the fund? What if, what if, what if? I have a 4 and 6-year-old, and I have absolutely no idea what they will want to do in 12 years from now. Honestly, I barely know what they will want tomorrow. So instead of trying to predict the future, I think parents should optimize for flexibility first and tax benefits second. Before we get into the list, I want to say something that a lot of parents don't want to hear. Funding your own retirement should probably be the priority over almost all of this. You can finance education. Your kids have their entire lives ahead of them to work, earn money, and build wealth. But if you reach retirement age without enough money to support yourself, there aren't many options left. One of the worst financial outcomes is becoming financially dependent on the very children you are trying to help. By the end of this video, I'll show you how some families combine multiple accounts together to create a pretty powerful escape hatch if their kid doesn't end up using the money for education. Before we get into it, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It means the world to me. All right, let's imagine two different families. Family A puts every dollar into education accounts because they're convinced their child will go to college. Family B focuses on flexibility first and taxes second. Fast forward 15 years. One child gets a full scholarship. Another starts a business. Another decides college isn't the right path. Suddenly, flexibility becomes incredibly valuable. That's the framework I want you to keep in your mind as we go through these options. All right, number one, probably the best place to start putting money away for your kids, if you can, is a Roth IRA in the child's name. Huge caveat here. The child has to have legitimate earned income. Legitimate being the key word. The work has to be real, documented, and reasonably compensated. This strategy becomes very real if you're a business owner and your child can legitimately help with the business. For 2026, the contribution limit is $7,500 or the child's earned income, whichever is lower. The upside here is enormous. The money grows tax-free for potentially 50 or 60 years. That kind of compounding gets crazy. And when the child eventually pulls the money out in retirement, it can come out tax-free. Another benefit is flexibility. Contributions, not the earnings, can generally be withdrawn if there's an emergency need. The downside, once they become an adult, the money is theirs. Maybe they invest it wisely, maybe they buy a Lamborghini, or even worse, they spend it all on Pokemon cards. So while I love the tax benefits here, you're giving up a lot of control. Let's move on to number two, which I'm calling a tie between the 529 and the Coverdell ESA. First, the 529. I personally like the idea of targeting enough contributions into the 529 so the account potentially grows to around $35,000 by college age. Why? Because under current law, up to $35K can potentially be rolled from a 529 into a Roth IRA over time if the child doesn't use the funds for education. That is the escape hatch. Now, there are important restrictions here. The 529 has to be open for at least 15 years. Contributions made within the last 5 years generally can't be rolled. The child still needs earned income during the rollover years, and annual Roth contribution limits still apply. But still, having that option makes the 529 much more attractive than it used to be. Big downside of the 529 plan is limited investment flexibility. Some plans are great, others are more restrictive. And this is where the Coverdell ESA gets interesting. With an ESA, you can contribute up to $2,000 per year per child. The investment flexibility is usually much broader. The downside is income limits. If you are single and your income is too high or married and above the phase-out range, you may not be able to contribute directly. Now, this is where things start getting more nuanced. A lower income family member, like a grandparent, they can contribute directly. Some tax advisors also discuss more advanced strategies involving business entities or gifts to the child, but those areas are less settled and should really be discussed with a tax advisor before attempting them. Another downside is that ESA funds generally need to be distributed by age 30. But there's another escape hatch. ESA funds can potentially be rolled into a 529 account. Then, later, under current law, some of those 529 funds may eventually make their way into a Roth IRA. So, if we really wanted to optimize flexibility, one strategy could look something like this. Open a 529 early with a small contribution so the 15-year clock starts ticking. Then prioritize ESA contributions for the additional investment flexibility. If the money never gets used for education, transfer ESA funds into the 529 later on. Yes, that involves multiple accounts, but if everything is housed at one or two brokerages, it's honestly not that difficult to manage. One quick thing I also want to mention here. Financial aid treatment matters. Parent-owned 529 plans are generally treated more favorably for FAFSA purposes than a custodial brokerage like a UTMA or UGMA, because those are assets which are considered student assets. So for some families, that can heavily influence the decision. Let's move on to number 4. The new 530A accounts, also called Trump accounts. These accounts are brand new, so I want to be careful here because guidance is still developing. But assuming the rules stay close to what we currently understand, these accounts could become very interesting. Let's say you already have enough in the 529 and ESA bucket that you think it could reasonably grow to around $35K for future education flexibility. Now you have another choice. Do you continue with a child brokerage account or use a 530A account? Here's why I currently lean toward the 530A account for some families. First, with a child brokerage account, you can run into kiddie tax issues from dividends, interest, and capital gains. Second, these accounts are expected to eventually function somewhat similarly to retirement-style accounts once the child reaches adulthood, which could create opportunities for low-income year Roth conversions. Again, these rules are brand new and future guidance could absolutely change some of this. Third, as currently interpreted, business owners may potentially be able to contribute up to $2,500 through an S Corp or C Corp. If that treatment survives future IRS guidance, that could create a very interesting planning opportunity. But again, these accounts are extremely new. We need more guidance before anyone treats these strategies as settled law. Let's move on to number 5, which I'm calling a three-way tie. At this point, you've maxed out the child's Roth IRA, you've built enough 529 ESA exposure for flexibility, you've potentially used the 530A account, and you still want to save more for the child. We basically have 3 choices left. Put more into the 529, use a child brokerage account, or keep the money in your own brokerage account. If we continue funding the 529, we might get some tax advantages, but potentially less flexibility if the child never uses the funds for education. If we use a child brokerage account, we may run into kiddie tax issues, and we also take on the 18-year-old with money risk. And if we keep the money in our own brokerage account, we maintain full control of the assets. That can create planning flexibility later on through strategic gifting or eventual inheritance planning. I honestly don't think there is a universally correct answer here. You really have to balance the probability your child will use the money for education, potential tax drag from brokerage accounts, your own retirement situation, your desire for control, and your overall estate planning goals. Personal finance is personal. This is not a rigid formula. It's a roadmap of things to think through. Discussing your specific situation with a knowledgeable professional can help you make these decisions with a lot more confidence. If you want help building a strategy for your family, schedule a free consultation in the link below.